You ever have one of those days where the world just kind of stops and spins differently for a minute? I swear, that day on the highway, June 2022, sun baking the road so hard the heat shimmered like water in the air, was one of those days for me and my dad. You gotta picture it. My hands still shaking a little on the steering wheel, my mind running circles after that doctor's appointment at Duke. Dad was slumped beside me, eyes closed, so tired from his chemo he could barely lift his head. All I wanted was to get him home and into bed, but as luck would have it, that little flash of blue in my rear view popped up, and my heart just sank. Trooper car, lights spinning, siren chirping just long enough to make my stomach drop. You know that feeling, right? When you're already stretched thin, nerves like electric wire, and then the universe decides to pile on just a little more. Well, I pulled over, rolled down my window, tried to look calm, but inside I was thinking, come on, not today, please. The officer strode up, tall, white guy, maybe early 30s, uniform all sharp edges and starch, badge shining in the sun. He looked at me, serious, polite, and asked if I knew I was speeding. I just nodded, told him I was sorry, but he glanced past me, eyes softening the moment he saw my dad. The old man looked so small in that seat, skin ashy, hands folded in his lap like a child's. There was this pause, a kind of hush where even the highway seemed to hold its breath. Let me back up a sec, because if you'd seen my dad before the cancer, you'd never recognize him. Mr. Wilkerson, 6'2", a voice like Sunday thunder. Always the one grilling at family reunions or embarrassing me in front of my friends with his corny jokes. That day, though, he barely seemed to fill out the seat. The officer, his name was Jared Doty, though I didn't know it yet, looked at me, looked at Dad, then just sort of melted, you know? Like he'd been there before. He asked where we were coming from, and I told him, Durham, Duke Hospital, Dad stage 4, we just wanted to get home. Jared didn't say much, just nodded, lips pressed tight. Then he walked back to his cruiser and left us sitting there, the engine ticking, me wondering if I'd get a ticket or just a warning. I watched him in the side mirror, saw him lean his head on the steering wheel, shoulders rising and falling, and I realized this wasn't just another cop on a power trip. This was someone feeling it too. A few minutes passed, long enough for my anxiety to bubble up again, but when he came back, he handed me my license, told me to watch my speed, and said we were free to go. No ticket, no lecture. I almost cried right then, out of relief and guilt, and something else I couldn't name. But then he did something I never saw coming. He leaned down, peered past me to my dad, and asked if he could say a prayer. Now, listen, I grew up in church, but I never expected a highway patrolman to offer prayers on the side of I-85. But that's what happened. He took my dad's hand in both of his, eyes closed, voice low, and started praying right there, traffic whooshing by, the whole world shrinking to that little bubble of kindness. He asked for strength, for peace, for comfort, his voice breaking a little as he spoke. My dad squeezed his hand back, the first real movement he'd made all day. It was like a current of hope passing through him, just for a moment. That moment stuck with me. You know? We drove home mostly in silence after that, Dad asleep before we hit the city limits, me thinking about how you never really know what someone else is carrying. Behind every uniform, every scowl, there's a story. 2 months later, Dad was gone. Stage 4 doesn't give second chances, and his last weeks blurred together in a haze of hospice visits, family goodbyes, and all the things you wish you'd said but never do. But I kept thinking about that cop, how he could have written me up, made my day worse, but instead, he chose grace. Funny thing is, I didn't even know his name until I posted the story online, just a blurry photo I snapped in the moment. Captioned with shaky hands, not really expecting anyone to care. The post blew up, people sharing their own stories, some good, some bad, about cops, about family, about what it means to show up for someone in their darkest hour. Turns out, Jared Doty had only been back on the job a few months himself. He'd had surgery, part of his colon removed after getting sick, and the pain was still fresh for him. Maybe that's why he understood, why he didn't need me to explain. Yeah, that happened. Sometimes the universe sends you the right person at the exact right time. But there's another layer to this. After the post went viral, people started reaching out, asking about Dad, about Jared, about whether one act of kindness could really make a difference. And I found myself wondering, does it? Does a prayer on the side of the road change anything? Dad still died. The world kept spinning. But for those 2 minutes, when Jarrett held his hand and prayed, my father wasn't just a patient or a statistic or a guy getting hustled off the highway. He was seen, honored, comforted, even as the end was closing in. That's more than most of us get, if we're honest. And here's the kicker. Turns out Jarrett, for all his discipline and badge and bravado, had to walk back to his cruiser after that prayer and sit alone, letting the tears fall before he could even drive away. I only found that out after someone messaged me saying they knew him, that he'd told them that stop nearly broke him, reminded him how thin the line is between doing your job and being human. You know what I mean? Life is heavy. Sometimes the little things are the only things that matter. So, the next time you see those flashing lights behind you, try to remember we're all fighting battles nobody else can see. Maybe a warning is worth more than a ticket. Maybe a prayer is worth more than a punishment. Maybe what this world needs isn't more rules, but more mercy. And maybe, just maybe, we could all be a little more like Jared on our worst days, choosing empathy when it costs us something, seeing the person instead of the problem. But hey, that's just my story. What would you have done in his shoes or mine? Do you believe a small act of kindness can ripple out and change the world, or is that just wishful thinking? Let me know what you think. Where's the line between justice and grace, and who gets to decide? Drop your thoughts below, and let's talk about it. You know, after Dad passed, I thought that moment with Officer Jarrett would just fade into the blur of everything else. The hospital bills, the casseroles from church folks, the way the world gets quiet and weird after a funeral. But let me tell you, life's got a funny way of circling back around, bringing things you thought were finished right back to your front door. I didn't realize the story had another chapter, not until a letter showed up at our mailbox, no return address, just my name written in a careful, almost old-fashioned hand. I figured it was a sympathy card, maybe another neighbor reaching out, but when I opened it, the first thing I saw was a photo. Me, Dad, and Officer Jarrett, right there on the shoulder of that highway, hands clasped in prayer. There was a note tucked in behind the photo, and as soon as I started reading, my heart started beating out of rhythm. It was from Jarrett. He said he'd seen my post online, said it meant something to know that his choice that day mattered, that it reached beyond the badge. He told me he'd been struggling since his own surgery, questioning if he could really handle coming back to the job, wondering if the pain would ever really leave his body or his mind. But after that day, he wrote, I realized I wasn't alone in the struggle, and maybe, just maybe, doing a little good on the worst days is worth more than a perfect record. He said Dad reminded him of his own father, another strong black man who didn't let the world make him small, even when cancer tried its best. And that's when it hit me, maybe I wasn't alone either. That feeling of emptiness, of everything being unfinished after someone you love passes away. It's heavy, but it's not just mine to carry. After that letter, I started getting messages from strangers, people who'd seen the story and wanted to tell me about their own highway prayers, their own moments of unexpected grace, folks from all over, black, white, old, young. Even a retired nurse from Alabama who said she'd never thought much of cops until she saw what Jarrett did for us. It was like this whole hidden web of humanity started to glow in the dark, just for a little while, reminding me that kindness can echo longer than we think. But you know what really caught me off guard? One evening about 6 months after Dad was gone, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. At first, I let it go to voicemail. Wasn't in the mood to talk, honestly. But something told me to listen. And when I did, there was a deep, careful voice on the other end. Ashley, this is Captain Rios from the State Highway Patrol. I'd like to talk to you about Officer Doty. It's nothing bad, I promise. Now, I'd heard stories about cops getting in trouble for things that didn't fit the playbook. Empathy sometimes doesn't play well with supervisors or quotas. My heart jumped straight to my throat, thinking somehow our story had gotten Jared in hot water. But when I called back, Captain Rios told me the exact opposite. He wanted to know more about what happened, because the department had been flooded with emails and letters from folks who saw the story, talking about how much it meant, how it changed their perspective. We're not always the heroes on the news, he admitted, voice tired. But this gave my people hope. Turns out, They decided to invite me to speak at a local community forum about policing, compassion, and what justice should really look like on the streets. I almost said no, public speaking wasn't my thing, and honestly, I didn't want to relive that day again in front of a bunch of strangers. But something in my gut told me I had to. Maybe it was Dad's stubborn streak coming through, or maybe it was just knowing that, for once, people were willing to listen. The night of the forum, I walked into that auditorium clutching Jarrett's letter in my hand. Heart pounding so hard I thought people could see it through my blouse. The room was packed, officers in uniform, folks from church, reporters, old women with purses clutched tight, teenagers half paying attention on their phones. I told our story the way it happened. No drama, no filter, just the raw truth. When I finished, there was this thick, loaded silence, like everyone was waiting to exhale. And then, right from the back row, someone stood up. A young man, skin the same deep brown as my father's, voice shaky but clear. My brother was killed in a traffic stop last year. I thought I'd never forgive another cop again, but hearing this, maybe I need to look again. That moment right there, that was the twist, the piece I never saw coming, not just the world seeing me and my dad, but someone else seeing possibility again, the chance that not every story has to end in pain. Afterward, Jarrett found me in the parking lot. He didn't say much, just hugged me, real tight, the way family does when words aren't enough. He said, "Ashley, sometimes the hardest thing is just to keep showing up." I looked him in the eye and said, "Yeah, but you did. You showed up for us." And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. So maybe that's what this is all about. Maybe the real legacy we leave isn't the big, showy stuff, but the tiny acts of courage, the choice to show up, to forgive, to pray even when nobody's watching. Maybe grace is a kind of justice too, quiet, stubborn, contagious. Now, I want to ask you, after everything, do you think a system built on rules and consequences can really make space for compassion? Or are these moments just rare exceptions in a world too busy to notice? Tell me, is it possible for one act of kindness to turn around years of pain and mistrust? Or does the past always win? Drop a comment, share your story, let's keep this conversation alive, because maybe, just maybe, that's how real change begins.